Have you ever stopped to think what actually happens when some really cutting-edge tech, you know, stuff designed for privacy just smashes head-on into the legal system?
Yeah, it's a collision course, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it brings up these huge fundamental questions about digital rights, open source code.
Even financial freedom, right?
Exactly. And that's really what we're diving into today, this fascinating and honestly a big concerning legal situation with the Samurai Wallet.
Which is a Bitcoin wallet focused heavily on privacy.
That's the one. And specifically, we're looking at the actions the U.S. government is taking, particularly the Southern District of New York, the SDNY.
Okay. And we're basing our discussion today on a really insightful article. It takes a pretty critical analytical stance on the indictment against the Samurai developers.
It's a good source. It mixes legal analysis with commentary from the community and, gives us a window into how the Bitcoin privacy folks are responding.
So our mission here, for you listening, is to unpack what's in this indictment, point out some, frankly, surprising technical, misunderstandings,
Oh, yeah, there are definitely some of those.
and then explore the bigger picture, right? What this means for open source software, for digital privacy, and this whole idea of financial sovereignty.
Let's do it.
So let's jump right in. The article kicks off talking about this superseding indictment that the SDNY filed against the Samurai developers. This isn't just a minor update, is it?
No, not at all. The article stresses this really increases the pressure and expands the scope of charges. It's a significant move.
How so? What specifically changed?
Well, for one, they extended the timeline. They're now alleging the criminal activities went on for several more months.
Okay, stretching the time frame.
But the really big headline grabber is the alleged amount of money laundered. It jumped massively.
From what to what?
It went from $100 million in the first indictment up to $250 million now.
Whoa, $250 million. That's a huge leap. The article sounds pretty skeptical about that number.
It does. And you have to ask, what's driving that increase? The piece suggests it seems to rely on, maybe ambiguous definitions of crime proceeds.
Or maybe questionable blockchain analysis. That's what it mentioned too.
Exactly. It feels a bit like,
Uh-huh.
are they just throwing bigger numbers out there? And it raises the question, what is the actual evidence for this $150 million jump?
Okay, let's unpack this then. What does it mean when the goalposts seem to be shifting like this, especially when you add in what the article says about KYC?
Right, the Know Your Customer procedures. The indictment apparently hammers on Samurai's lack of KYC.
But wait, the key point the article makes, and it seems crucial, is that KYC isn't actually legally required for non-custodial wallets like Samurai, right?
Precisely. That's the kicker. KYC laws apply to custodial services, businesses holding funds for users. Samurai doesn't hold user funds. Users control their own keys.
So the indictment is treating the absence of something that isn't required as a legal failing.
That's what it looks like, yeah. It points towards this potential strategy of legal overreach, almost like they're trying to criminalize the act of building the tools themselves.
Even if the developers don't control how people use them.
Exactly. Treating software developers like criminals just for building the software. It's a worrying angle.
So if the legal strategy itself seems maybe a bit shaky, what about the technical side? Does the indictment show a solid grasp of how this tech actually works?
Well, this is where the article suggests things get, let's say, problematic. It argues the indictment shows a real lack of understanding.
Of how non-custodial wallets work and the privacy tools.
Yeah, the basic mechanics. For instance, there's a specific claim the SDNY made that Samurai's coordinator server, that's part of their Whirlpool mixing service, was, quote, generating new addresses on behalf of users.
Okay, generating new addresses on behalf of users.
Yeah.
That sounds specific. Why is that a problem, technically speaking?
Because it's technically impossible for a non-custodial wallet like Samurai. Fundamentally, the article explains this really clearly. It shows a basic misunderstanding of private keys and wallet architecture. In a non-custodial wallet, you, the user, control your private keys.
Only the user.
Only the user. Those keys are what generate your addresses, the server, the coordinator.
Yeah.
It can't generate addresses for you because it doesn't have your keys. It just wouldn't work that way.
So the accusation itself reveals they don't quite get the tech?
It strongly suggests that. It's like accusing a mailbox manufacturer of writing the letters that go inside the mailboxes they sell. It just doesn't compute.
Okay, that's one technical point. Were there others the article flagged?
Oh, yeah. The fee calculation seems off, too. Way off, actually.
The fees Samurai supposedly earned.
Right. The government alleges Samourai earned about $4.5 million in fees from Whirlpool transactions, and they link this to $2 billion in total Whirlpool volume.
Okay. $4.5 million from $2 billion. What's the issue there?
Well, the article points out the basic math doesn't seem to add up. Samurai's Whirlpool fee structure involved different components, but a significant part was related to the amount mixed, not the total volume flowing through. If you look at the likely pool sizes and the fees charged per mix.
It doesn't get you to $4.5 million from $2 billion.
Not easily, no. The article does a quick calculation saying something like 5% of $90 million would be $4.5 million. The $2 billion figure seems, well, disconnected from how the fees were likely generated.
So is the suggestion that the $2 billion figure is inflated, or maybe they're just confusing total throughput with the actual fee base?
Could be either, or maybe both. The article leans towards suggesting it's either, inflated figures or perhaps even a deliberate attempt to make the numbers sound more dramatic, confuse things a bit.
Wow. That's a pretty serious disconnect then between the technical reality and what's being alleged in court documents.
It certainly seems that way, based on the analysis in the article.
Okay, so this leads us into the broader concerns, right? The legal and ethical questions. The article really pushes this idea that the case is, quote, less about justice and more about making an example out of privacy developers.
That's a central theme, yeah. And one observation used to back this up is quite striking. Despite these huge dollar figures, $250 million alleged, and a supposed ability to trace funds on the blockchain.
No users have been charged.
Exactly. Not a single user mentioned as being indicted, just the developers, which is odd. If the core issue is money laundering at that scale, you'd expect to see charges against those moving the funds.
That is strange. And what about that drug charge?
Right, the conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. The article calls this addition bizarre.
What bizarre?
Because it seems to stem solely from the fact that someone who happened to be a drug dealer allegedly used Whirlpool. It's not an allegation that Samourai itself was set up to facilitate drug deals.
So it's guilt by association. Because a tool could be used by a criminal, the creators are conspirators.
That seems to be the implication the article draws. And this really feeds into that strong First Amendment argument bubbling underneath.
The code is speech argument.
Precisely. The idea that writing and publishing open source software is a form of expression, and developers shouldn't be punished just for creating tools that could be misused by others.
It feels like a slippery slope.
It does. And the commentator suggests the government, by, increasing the time window and the dollar amounts in this superseding indictment, might actually be showing weakness.
How so? Like they're trying to pressure the defendants?
Yeah, potentially flailing legally, trying to build a scarier case to maybe push for a guilty plea rather than risk a trial where these technical legal arguments get aired out.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, then, this raises a really important question, doesn't it? What kind of precedent does this set?
That's the million-dollar question, or maybe the $250 million question in this case.
Yeah.
What does this mean for anyone developing software, especially privacy-enhancing tools, particularly open-source, non-custodial ones?
It's a serious consideration. So what does this all mean for you, the person listening who maybe values online privacy or just wants to understand how this legal landscape is changing?
Well, one positive takeaway perhaps is about resilience.
Even with all this legal pressure, the tools don't just disappear.
Not necessarily. The article makes a point of highlighting how the tools Samourai created, because they were open source, are actually living on.
Through forks, people taking the code and continuing it.
Exactly. It specifically mentions a project called Ashigaru Wallet plus Whirlpool Terminal V1. Apparently, they've already integrated the Whirlpool mixing functionality.
So the privacy capability remains accessible.
It seems so. It really demonstrates what the article calls Bitcoin resilience. It draws a parallel to BitTorrent.
Ah, yeah. Despite years of crackdowns, BitTorrent protocols and clients are still widely used.
Precisely. The technology, the protocol, it tends to outlive specific companies or developers. And this new Ashigaru wallet, it also supports building your own dojo node.
Which lets you run the backend infrastructure yourself.
Yes, making the use of Bitcoin mixing even more private and decentralized, less reliant on any central point.
That's really fascinating. It's not just the code surviving. It sounds like the community is actively building and adapting. The article mentioned some real-world stuff, too.
It did, yeah. Some quite inspiring examples of community action. It highlighted an event called the SAT Market in Calgary.
SAT Market? What was that?
A real-world physical marketplace where everything was priced and paid for in Bitcoin, specifically non-KYC Bitcoin.
So people just trading goods and services directly, peer-to-peer, using Bitcoin.
Yep. The article mentioned local participants like butchers, artists, dentists, even some banks who are apparently involved in some capacity, all transacting directly.
Wow. That's putting the philosophy into practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it underscores this strong push for non-KYC peer-to-peer trading. The article also mentioned an app, Vexel.
Vexel, yeah. What does that do?
It's a mobile app that helps connect Bitcoin buyers and sellers, but based on trust circles, like friends of friends. Again, facilitating that direct, permissionless exchange.
So it all ties back to that core philosophy the article mentions.
Financial sovereignty, decentralization, permissionless commerce. These aren't just abstract ideas. People are actively trying to build systems that embody them.
Okay. So wrapping things up then, the article's main takeaway seems to be that this legal action against Samourai feels like a, quote, desperate overreach.
Yeah, one that it argues lacks strong legal grounding, especially given the technical issues and the non-custodial nature of the wallet.
And it makes that powerful point. You can target individual developers, maybe, but stopping the spread of open source privacy tools, that's much harder, maybe impossible.
Right, which leads to the article's conclusion, really. A call to action for the Bitcoin community.
To keep pushing back, educating, building alternatives.
Exactly. It's not just about defending Samurai's developers, but about defending the principles.
So for you listening, the encouragement is really to think about what role you can play. Maybe it's starting something local, like that SAT market idea.
Or learning new skills, contributing code, design, or even just educating others. Supporting developers who face these kinds of charges, protecting privacy rights in general.
It leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? In this world where we're constantly grappling with digital rights, government surveillance, what does a truly permissionless private future actually look like?
And crucially, what role do you play in either building that future or defending the possibility of it?